Wilmot's Warehouse. Gonna give this a rating of 7.5 out of 10. If you're into an organizational game that focuses on spatial awareness and memory and that kind of stuff, this is definitely going to be up your alley. Unfortunately, it's not so much for me, but that doesn't mean I can't see this game's merits. Recommendation wise, it really depends on the type of person you're recommending this to. If they're into that kind of organization stuff, yes, I definitely recommend this sort of game, except that's not many people. Epic oftentimes gives games away for free, and this was one of them. I do think that the first 2 hours or so was very entertaining and worth the while, except past that the returns are rapidly diminishing, and I eventually just got bored that I stopped playing. If you're going to be spending money on this, you really need to understand that there isn't that much replayability value. That's the overall baseline review. If you want to go into more depths, please continue listening on to the pros and cons. The pros. This game is very well executed. A lot of the smoothness and the controls and that kind of stuff are very refined and they feel good. The basic sound design, aka what it sounds like to pick up an object and what it sounds like to dash or move around, or when something is too heavy, all that sound design is very satisfying to listen to. The game devs definitely know their audience, and it shows through their decisions for creating mechanics for the game. For example, the upgrade system. Some of them are more or less useless or more aesthetic based, which is honestly fine, but the other ones that are more useful, such as removing pillars that block space in the middle of the map to have more space to put your stuff in, and the dash and increasing your strength to hold more blocks, are obviously catered to improving the efficiency of your ability to move around or organize your warehouse. The next big pro was the general theming of this game. Although there wasn't much of a story, there only was a slowly incrementing difficulty where there is more and more things to organize in a given space. There's many small things. For example, the manager, I believe his name was CJ, giving you these really lackluster motivational posters to be kind of a tongue-in-cheek humor sort of thing. And the music honestly was, I believe, a thematic choice, but you're going to notice how I'm going to mention this again when I dive into the cons. A bunch of these thematic choices to show the monotony and repetition of blue collar workers, I think, is intentional from the game developers. So it adds an extra layer of, I don't want to say realism, but I guess immersion for people who are actually working those kinds of jobs. It's meant to relay that kind of concept. Moving on to cons, I'll just start with what I just mentioned. The music was incredibly annoying, and I started losing my mind, I believe, about 90 minutes in from the music. It was repetitious, and it wasn't exactly catchy or anything. It was just more annoying and kind of got my nerves really fast. I understand that there is that thematic benefit. It's intentional. It's going for an extra immersive piece. Oh, this is supposed to be driving you crazy. That's kind of like the point. Unfortunately, because it's a game that's meant to be played for at least a few more hours than I did, it getting on my nerves doesn't help the playability. It's going to make people turn away from this game. And as a game developer, you still don't want that. I think a good fix for this is simply adding additional tracks that have a very similar monotonous vibe, elevator music vibe to it, so that yes, we still have the same theme, that this is supposed to be boring and not very interesting, but also double up on, okay, we're not going to drive the player insane when they have to listen to the same, I believe, maybe a minute long track over and over again while they're trying to organize their products. Naturally, different players will have different experiences. I personally was very specific with how I wanted to organize things, and during stock takes, I did not stop until I actually got it there, and that might have taken a lot longer than most players would have originally played for. So that is a little bit of my fault. Moving forward, during stock takes, I believe that you should have some sort of virtual backpack or something that allows you to hold as many blocks as you can instead of just the 12 or however much you can hold for your specific upgrades at the time. And the only reason why is because during stock takes, the whole point is so that you can reorganize things as needed. Unfortunately, you're limited to the strength amount. So at the end there, I was up to 12, but I want to reorganize almost everything. Because of that, I ended up taking an incredibly long amount of time just to reorganize if there had that virtual backpack sort of thing, it would have been a lot better. And the only time you would be able to access this kind of mechanic is during stock takes, where you have infinite time. And that's the key thing. The whole point of stock takes is when you have infinite time to reorganize, as opposed to during the actual drop off and pick up periods where it's limited to, I believe, 2 to 3 minutes. Then obviously you can't have that mechanic, otherwise it's going to be too OP, make the game too easy. That being said, I mentioned this in every review, it's obviously not easy to implement something in a game, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm taking the game developers for granted, but it is just a simple point that having this mechanic would make the game a lot more playable and would generate a little bit more playability, because it's a huge quality of life buff, as opposed to needing to torture yourself moving things individually or in groups of 12 or however many to reorganize during the infinite time periods of reorganization. Lastly, Wilmot's Warehouse suffers from the lack of replayability. Outside of these music gripes and the time that it takes to reorganize during stock takes, after the artificial difficulty gets set up to, I believe, 200 products, after a certain point it just becomes a little bit boring. You have your system, and if it works, it works. It's going to get you through to the end of the game. But even before I even got there, I was starting to get bored of the game. I didn't even finish it. It ended up being just trying to unlock all these power-ups, and then I would just call it from there. I have the rest of my playthrough. I'll post it in the description of this video if you really want to watch it, but I realized that I was getting bored of the game, and I can't imagine how boring it would be to watch someone bored playing a game. So I decided to not actually include that as a video for my daily uploads. I just believe that the quality for that kind of content isn't there, so I'm choosing not to extend that series, but it is still in existence in case you do want that playthrough. And because of those things, those 2.5 points, not very much of a deduction, but you have to realize when I'm rating these games, if a game dev knows exactly what they want to do and they do it well, they're going to get a majority of their points. And if they execute it well, that's even more. But there are still some personal takes that will knock you down a few kicks, and that is why it gets a 7.5 out of 10. It's not really a game for me. I did compare it to Tetris, but at the end of the day, Tetris has that replayability where it's a little bit more satisfying and the difficulty doesn't feel artificially inflated and repetitive, as opposed to in Wilmot's Warehouse, where you're just simply adding a bunch of extra products. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments, and if you have any other personal points about Wilmot's Warehouse. Otherwise, if you found this review at least a little bit helpful, please be sure to give a like and subscribe